Okay, I'm so glad you're all able to join us for today's presentation on the property tax assessment freeze and renovating your historic home. Today we have Susan Benjamin and Christopher Inc. here, and we will take questions at the end. So I will let them take it away.
All right, can you hear us okay?
Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all for coming on a snowy, cold Sunday afternoon and for tuning in. We're very much looking forward to telling you about landmarking in Winnetka and about the property tax assessment freeze, which is a program that is available to reward homeowners who put a lot of money into their house to preserve it, which is what we're all about. I'm an architectural historian. I have a business in historic preservation. I've done some landmarking and worked with people in town about the attaining the property tax assessment freeze. And Chris is a member of the commission and a practicing architect, and he'll tell you about landmarking, but also about some projects he's worked on, which are pretty interesting. I know you've heard about them before, but we'll save that for a bit. Anyway, the property tax assessment freeze is a program that is run by the State Historic Preservation Office in Springfield. And it's been in existence for quite a long time. I think probably about 40 years or so. Next, please. This is a project that I really recently worked on for the Bartons who live at 480 Oak Street. You can see they are proudly showing their landmark on the front of their house. They've got it displayed for all to see. It's quite a fabulous house. And let's talk a bit about what the community benefits of the freeze are, in addition to the benefits that accrue to the homeowner. It encourages preservation through the designation of landmarks. It lets people know that these are special places and this is a special community. And I have a special love for it because I married somebody who grew up on Glendale Avenue. So you can be sure for the last 50 plus years, I have been a fan and involved in Winnetka in addition to work. It increases property values because basically when you take the freeze, you're upgrading your house and you're making it quite wonderful for other people to enjoy. And should you want to sell your house, it will show beautifully. And more importantly, probably it preserves what Winnetka is all about. Next, please. And this is the house that I worked on for the Bartons. It's on Oak Street where you turn toward the lake on that wonderful little boulevard. And this was a garage, believe it or not, for the main house. It was designed by Benjamin Marshall of fame for the Drake Hotel and South Shore Country Club. And what it has turned in, they flipped the house around many, many years ago, put the main entrance toward this wonderful little access. And the Bartons just love the house. There's an article in the Gazette that I wrote on it. So if you want to pick that up and read more. Next, please. Another house that many, many years ago was really endangered, the Kuppenheimer House on Burr, designed by David Adler in 1937. It was purchased to tear down and build another house, and it was moved across the street and the house was preserved. And equally important, Chip did a wonderful restoration on the house and put back a garage that had been taken off. And it is just a stunning building that is beautifully preserved today. And I wrote the National Register nomination for it then, probably 20 years ago. Next, please. So what's the benefit to the homeowner? This is the nuts and bolts about what is important. The benefit is a freeze on your property tax assessment for 8 years at the level it was at when your rehabilitation work on the property began. So you're getting it frozen at a lower level for 8 years, plus another 3 years, while it goes up incrementally to what it would have been had there been no freeze. So altogether, it's 11 years of a benefit. And what you're looking at now is our house. We live in a house that Larry Perkins designed in 1941, and he designed, Perkins and Will designed Crow Island, and I think they designed this building. I think so, but that's for me to check on. But in any case, we did the freeze on our house many years ago when we remodeled the kitchen. We put in insulation, and we did the kinds of things that people want to do to upgrade their homes and make them livable for themselves. Next, please. I think what's really important is that I was interviewed for this article recently in Aspire North Shore, and it talked about, well, what don't people kind of understand? Why do you have to tear down a house? Well, the truth is you don't, because you can buy a historic house with, early growth timber used for the historic windows with beautiful quarter sawn oak floors, all these things, and you can update it to 21st century needs. I mean, we all have computers. We all have to have, our houses have to be, first of all, safe with electricity and plumbing and HVAC, all in excellent condition, but also you have to be able to adapt how you want to live in it using computer technology. And I showed this house on Cherry because it's an example of somebody who did indeed buy this really stunning Queen Anne house and update it to the way they want to live in it. So here is what, and we'll at the end, we're here both to answer any kinds of questions. To be eligible, what does it have to be? It has to be a local landmark, and Chris will talk about that. And you guys have the most supportive commission. So, if we've done a couple of landmark nominations recently, including the one I just showed you, and it's something that is encouraged locally to do it, and to be, everyone will be very helpful. So it has to either be a local landmark or listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and that's a longer process and a little more challenging. It is what the National Register really is a honorific situation where people are rewarded for their wonderful house, but there are no perks that go with it. So in order to qualify for the tax freeze, local landmark or listed on the register. And it could be for a single family house. This isn't so relevant here, but people who live in co-ops and condos can take advantage of it too. And we have done a couple of co-op buildings, one on South Shore Drive and one on Lakeshore Drive, and it's a nice perk for a multifamily building or up to 6 flats. That's so that if an owner lives in a 6-flat building and rents out some of the units, they qualify too, and that's because of Chicago, because there are a lot of 3 flats and 4 flats and 6 flats in the city. So what need you to do other than qualifying single family house, local landmark, and you need to spend 25% of the assessor's market value. And I know I'm getting into the weeds, but I'll talk a little bit about that to make it clearer. The year the work began. And more important is that you need to follow preservation guidelines that are called the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation. And you're going to see lots of pictures of those. Next. I've worked on several houses here over the years, and I just want to show one of them. This is one at 978 Euclid. That was many years ago I did it. It also, houses in a historic district qualify as well, but Winnetka as yet does not have any historic districts. Next. I mentioned what the National Register of Historic Places is. And I mentioned that it's honorific, but look how many buildings nationally are actually listed on the register. 80,000 individual buildings, and that's just individual buildings, many more located in historic districts. And this is a house that I wrote for Louise, National Register nomination. I wrote for Louise Holland, this beautiful home on Oak Street that is classical revival, and it's really special and one that you should all drive by if you're not familiar with. Next, please. Winnetka currently has 32 local landmarks and receptive to lots more. We've done 2 very recently. This is a list. By the way, the list is online too. So there's a lot of good material online. Next, please. I turn it over to Chris because this is his house.
So I'm on the Historic Preservation Commission here locally. We moved to town in 2013, I believe, and we looked at kind of houses all around the adjacent suburbs when we were leaving downtown Chicago. And we were just looking at historic homes, and we found the Lola Maverick Lloyd House, which is a local landmark, and it had been on the market for a relatively short period of time, I believe, when we found out about it. And the original family was selling it, and it's on a larger lot for the neighborhood, and they had owned it since it was built in 1920. The third generation was selling it, and they were interested in making sure that it didn't get torn down by a future buyer. So they designated it as a local landmark, and they also put it on the National Register of Historic Places. There's a lot of history with the Lloyd family locally in Winnetka with the Lloyd House, and then this house as well. And the things that the family had done from a historical standpoint was a big part of the National Register nomination as well that Susan worked on for the house. And they also put preservation easements, which we won't get into as much in this today, but they wanted to protect the exterior of the house, the appearance of it, as well as the interior. Most of the interior elements and also the landscape, because before they sold it, they put a lot of effort into restoring native plants on the property, and they wanted to make sure that didn't get paved over for a tennis court or something like that. So they put preservation easements on the landscape as well, that are held by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. But it's a really interesting house that was designed by a Swedish architect designer. I didn't put, I think maybe a couple more photos. Oh, maybe not. But there's a detail here of just some of the kind of folk art hand carved elements in the house, and there's a mural and things like that are some of the elements that are preserved in the easement. But we have not done a lot of big projects in the house. We've really what attracted us to it is that it had a lot of character and it's very unique. Everyone in the neighborhood certainly knows it by the fence around the perimeter, if nothing else. And so we didn't really want to make any big changes, but being a local landmark, we certainly could have, if we did more projects in a period of time, could have taken advantage of the property tax assessment freeze.
And some material on the landmark nomination with just bits of the application. Again, this is all online, so you don't have to feel like you have to take it all in like this, because we know it's now kind of not easy to grasp all the details. But you want to mention a little bit about it, Chris?
So on the Landmark Commission, if somebody's interested in the Historic Preservation Commission, if somebody's interested in applying for their house to be a local landmark, there's an application process, and they would contact the Village of Winnetka Planning Department to reach out and find out about the process. And that's something that a consultant like Susan could prepare the nomination for, or we've had people come to the commission that have prepared them themselves as well. So it just depends how, what people want to do with the research, and then the process kind of spells out what information to include and the historical research and why it's important and the documentation and that sort of thing. And then it would come before the Historic Preservation Commission for review. If there were any comments or modifications, those would go back, and then it could come back before the commission again. But as Susan mentioned, I think the village and the Historic Preservation Commission are really supportive of local landmarking and excited to meet homeowners that are interested in celebrating the history of their house in town. So it's certainly a process that is really supportive and encouraged as well. Susan mentioned National Register listing, which can be a longer process. I've gone through that myself, and I've worked with Susan on a couple of projects to get that through. And that's a longer process, and it's also a bit more involved in the sense that you have to kind of make the case in a different way, more so than locally landmarking. So it's certainly a process that we'd be happy to talk to, and the Historic Preservation Commission and the village could certainly provide more information if anyone was interested in that, whether as part of a tax freeze or just as a way to kind of celebrate the history of your house as well.
This is just material that you would prepare. Again, you can check it all out in detail online, but it's pretty straightforward. And the staff is also great. I've worked with Anne and Chris for many years, and they're good records there. You want to do the next one? These are just some questions that are asked. Again, you can see generally the kinds of things that you would fill out on the form. And it's I realize I'm a junkie, but once you get into research, it really is fascinating. I'll give you an example, like our house. So, we bought this great house, and small, and we loved it so much that we made some changes to the kitchen and, that the kinds of things that people do. And we got to know Larry Perkins, who would come over, and he and Midge we'd have a glass of sherry and listen to Bach or whatever. And getting to know him just of itself was a very special experience. And then as we became friends, I remember there was a National Trust Conference here. And I asked Larry, I guess I'm no shrinking violet about that. I said, would you participate? He went to Crow Island, and there was a great tour, and he explained progressive education at Crow Island. And so that was really a special perk because he happened to be around. And sometimes if your house is a newer house, that indeed could be the case. So that, and then it turned out that the people who owned our house, he was an advertising guy. And I have read, because now you can go to like ancestry.com, you can go to newspapers.com. I told you I'm a junkie because I could stay up till the middle of the night looking up all this stuff. But I indeed found a newspaper clipping that this guy, his name was Swenson, created the saying, "Say it with flowers." So, you just really, I think it's marvelous to have a house that's a significant piece of architecture and that contributes to the character of the community, but it's also fun to dig out this stuff. Next.
And I will say in the research process too that the Historical Society locally, if you live in town or are interested, and whether or not you've been there or not, but they have a historic house file on most of the houses in the village where they've accumulated newspaper clippings and photos and things like that. It's really fun to go and see what exists. We went there to look soon after we moved in, and there were just a lot of old photos of what the house looked like, and we could see how it changed over time, and a great resource if you were doing this process yourself or just interested in the history of a certain building in town or house.
And between what Chris mentioned about the Historical Society and Megan, everybody are great in terms of having information and helping, but also there are terrific files at the village on permits. So you can see how a property evolved over time and who lived there and what changes were made. So there is a wealth of information to teach you about the character and significance of your house. Now, there's a lot on research. We just put this in here to show you that it's out there, and then it'll tell you the places to go. The village. I don't know about the water department. I've never done that, but I would start with the low-hanging fruit, and the low-hanging fruit are at the village and the Historical Society. And then the Recorder of Deeds, you can trace that back. I mean, there are just all kinds of of things you can do. Ancestry, I'm quite sure, and Aaron will have to answer this question, but libraries tend to, if you don't have Ancestry on your computer because it's a subscription, you can go to the library and pull all this stuff. ProQuest is an index to the historic newspapers. So you can check the New York Times, Los Angeles Times. It's the New York Times that you want, or the Tribune. The Tribune is a great source. And the Daily News has got historic photographs. So there's just a lot of information out there. This is just to show you there is an ordinance. And if you want to look at that, that's out there too, to see the process involved with landmarking. So this is one of the first houses I think I did in Winnetka. It's on Trap Lane. It was hard to get it. I didn't have, because things disappear from your computer. I didn't have the records anymore. But this is on Trap Lane, and it's a wonderful house that was once owned a lot of property and has since been subdivided. But the house is beautiful, and we locally landmarked it, and we got to help people get the tax freeze. And if I tell you all of this, I'm saying it because I've worked on these projects for many years, but you can do it yourself too. It depends on the kinds of work you do. We can talk about that. If you're only doing a kitchen and a few bathrooms, you don't need me. If it's complicated, probably, then I'm willing and happy to help. Next. Okay, the process, without getting into the weeds too much. It's a 3-part process. The first part is we call the part 1, and that's when you do your local landmark nomination. And the importance of filling out this, which will take you 15 minutes, is that it is submitted to the State Historic Preservation Office, who administers this program, and you are assigned, or you can pick, one of the 3 architectural reviewers, and that basically launches the process. So it's really important that this is the first thing you do so that you can get started.
And can I ask for clarification on this? If somebody were to buy a house that's already a landmark or on the National Register, they could essentially bypass part 1 and move to part 2, right?
You just check a box, basically. You're right.
Yeah,
You don't have to say, well, what are 50 words that describe the significance? Well, you don't need to do it. You just check it off. Okay, again, I realize I'm being redundant, but I'm doing it because this is the guts of it. Local landmark or National Register, single family owner occupied, spend 25% of the assessor's fair market value, the year the work began, and follow preservation guidelines, which will be, I'm going to explain all this so you can see what's involved. Okay, this part is less interesting probably because it's numbers, but it's hard to grasp once. But I tried to clarify. This is a Robert Seifer's house I worked on in Northwest Evanston. So it's a contributing building. I can't remember I think we landmarked it in Evanston to make it qualify because they don't have a district in Northwest Evanston. I'm going to go over the numbers and hopefully this is pretty clear. Okay, so what is the total assessed value? It's $72,000. The assessor's market value is 10 times that. That is throughout Cook County. So you don't need to pay a whole lot of attention to the assessed value, but you need to know what the assessor's market value is. So that was for 2015. Now here we are in 2016, and guess what? It went up. So it went, and you can see that here, 2016, it's over $1 million. So it went from 723,000 to over $1 million. That is a substantial savings. If you can go back a year, and you can, you don't need to start at the very beginning. You can start in the middle. But in this case, they're starting at the beginning, and they need to spend 25% of the assessor's market value the year you started the work. So they start in 2024. And that is 25% of the $700,000 number. So the threshold is $180,000. We'll save questions to the end, but do you have any questions now? Because it's really important to me that this is clear, that you spend 25% of the assessor's market value the year the work started, not the $1 million. If anybody has any questions now, let's take this one because we're lingering on this probably, more complex. Yes.
So my question is, if you just finding out about this now, if you did the work, let's just say you did the work in 2020, or you did the work in 2021, and the house, say the house was appraised for.
Assessed, not appraised.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's why we're doing this now, because it's complicated.
How far back, my question is, how far back can you go?
And for the people, just quickly on the people that are tuning in remotely, the question was, how far back can you go with those expenses?
Yeah, no, that is a really important question. So you can go back in time. You just must not have completed the work more than 2 years ago. So, but if you started in 2020 and you finished, you have up to 4 years to do this project. The statute says 2 years, but you have 4 years with a sign off from the state. So I have worked on, because, first of all, these projects can be very expensive. That's and that is a legitimate reason for wanting to extend the time period from 2 to 4 years. So let's say you started in 2020 and you finished in 2023 or 24. And BTW, as a homeowner, when do you ever stop spending money on your never, but it doesn't matter what you spend. I mean, there could be big projects. Maybe you started a big project in 2020, but then you did some decorating. Say you painted a room in 2023 or 2024. It counts. And I'm going to go over in detail everything that counts. Huge. And pictures. So you'll see, and it's all for real. So it's possible. I would not discount it as I can't do it because it was 4 years ago. If you go back more than 2 years ago where you didn't even paint a room or go shopping at Home Depot to repair a faucet. But I'm not kidding. I mean, all these little things, they all count. You do need records because you need to know what it looked like before so you can, count it all. But today, it's like a miracle. You can look online and look at old realtors' photos, and then you can go to the realtors' photos and go back. So it's a whole lot easier today to justify what you did before than it was 10 years ago.
So the point is, you can go back.
Yes.
Or not today and try to get landmark status. Say it doesn't happen until 2026.
Oh, it won't take that long.
But then you can go back still, as long as you completed the work within that 4-year period.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
What type of record keeping or evidence needs to be?
These are good questions.
Needs to be on the application to prove that you have spent 25% or more.
Okay.
And that's just really quickly, in case you people didn't hear that. The question was, what type of records do you keep to track those expenses?
You do have to prove it, and I'll touch on that briefly. But it's very good if you kept a spreadsheet. You would, you're of an age, and then you have to have backup for only for the 25%. If you spent $1 million and it was and the 25% is 300,000, you don't have to start looking at every receipt, but you do need backup for what you put on the spreadsheet up to the 25%. So it could be invoice marked paid. I've used lien waivers a lot because you get a sign off from your contractor, and there it is, $385,000, one piece of paper, or invoices marked paid, canceled checks, and that's all online. Again, EFT. You can pull it all out. It's gotten a lot easier to justify today. So this is all good.
Who has to assess the value to get this number?
It is the assessor's market value. You go to the Cook County Assessor's Office, or you go to the Cook, if you want to go back in time, you go to the Cook County Tax Portal. I don't think I put that on here, but that's something to know. It's not rocket science to get to them. Well, you just have to be careful because you know what it's like on the computer. Somebody else is going to tell you that they know something, and then you have to sign up and you have to pay. And no, you just go to the Cook County Assessor and it'll give you 25 and 24. If you want to know further back, you go to the Cook County Tax Portal. Bingo, it's great. It's right there. So you have to show what it was the year you started, easy, and you have to have backup and a spreadsheet. And it doesn't, if you don't do an Excel spreadsheet, that's okay. You just have to have something that indicates, do an outline or something, because if you've gone back in time and you haven't done that, you can piece it together in a way that they'll accept. So is there any other question about this part? Yes.
Just for further clarification.
Sure.
Before you start this process, though, you have to have it either designated as a landmark by the village or on the register. Is that correct?
Yes,
Thank you.
except that you can start the process. You just can't get the freeze till it's
Got it.
the
Thank you.
landmark is done. It
Thank
doesn't have to be a landmark when you start.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, here's the fun part.
There's a question in the back.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see. Yes.
It's me, and they can hear me at home, I think. At home, Jan Churchwell chimed in, the NT Township Assessor, saying people in NTT can call my office for info to help them with evaluating receipt keeping, etc.
Show my thumbs up. Thumbs up.
Yeah, that's super helpful.
Super helpful over the years. Yes, that's great. So, and that's easy. It's down the street.
So we just have one.
Absolutely.
If all this has been done already, and then you get qualified, does the freeze go forward then, or does it go backwards? How does it work?
Okay, once everything is approved, it's forward. It goes forward, approval, and you can freeze it at a lower number back then, 2020. I should mention one other thing. It doesn't transfer if you sell the house.
No, I understand that, but I mean, if it's assessed, certain kind of things have gone up a lot.
Oh, I know.
So
I get sticker shock every time I look.
So then they'll go back and reassess. And go back.
Okay, what happens is that, well, I'm going to show you pictures so you'll see this, but once you've met all these qualifications, the State Historic Preservation Office sends, and I'll show you a picture of it, sends a document, looks like a diploma, to the assessor's office, the Cook County Assessor's Office, and every January you have to go online and pull something off that says, yes, I still own the house. They used to send it to you, but they don't do it anymore. But you can always call if you're confused about anything. You can call me, or you can call whether I've worked with you or not, or you can call the State Historic Preservation Office. You can call Chris or Jack, or whatever. But that's something you have to do. And if sometimes somebody doesn't do it and they don't tell me, like a client in Chicago, I said, because they're not necessarily on top of it, because you have to be. But the state office will tell you that. I will tell you that if we work together. But that's the only thing you have to do moving forward. And keep your records and keep an eye on things. Ye of little trust to bureaucracies. So okay, let's look at so now we've sort of gone through the money, but I'm going to revisit it briefly. But let's talk about, well, what does it mean following the Secretary of the Interior standards? Can I paint my house yellow? Yes. But let's talk about what you need to be watchful of. Next. Okay, so there are 10 standards. Basically, it's repair instead of replace in the major public spaces and from what you can see from the street, because it's a public benefit program. So you preserve historic features, You're not required, let's say somebody changed the staircase, which is hopefully not, but if somebody changed the staircase, you're not required to restore the old staircase. You know, you're not responsible for the sins of the past, is the way they put it. So that's important to know. You're not obliged to restore. So repair, you don't have to restore. Non-original alterations may be significant and become significant over time. So what does all that mean? Well, it's not original. Well, the Rookery downtown that Burnham and Root did, and then the Frank Lloyd Wright did the lobby in 1905. So nobody's going to tear out the one could, I guess, but nobody should tear out the Frank Lloyd Wright lobby. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line. So there are things in that building that you all know that is just iconic, but this applies in general to our homes. And I'm going to show you stuff so you'll see what I mean. But if in that particular building, changes that have taken place subsequent to 1887, when the building was built, have gained significance themselves, like the Frank Lloyd Wright lobby, like in the 1930s, William Drummond, these gorgeous Art Deco elevator doors. You can't, those have to be respected and retained too. So that's what it means when it says historic features that have changed over time need to be respected and retained. That's kind of what that's about. Non-historic features, which is defined as less than 50 years old, you can take out. So that's just the way the law is. I mean, I just, it is what it is. And compatible additions and changes are absolutely allowed. You're absolutely allowed additions, and that counts for the 25%. Yay. I mean, because let's say you put a kitchen addition at the back. Well, kitchens are really expensive. So you can count the 150,000, I'm picking a number out of the hat, but 150,000 on the kitchen that is an addition, not within the footprint of the house. You can count it. And that's a new thing, but this is good. Okay, so this is a part 2. This is what you fill out to describe the scope of work. And you do need before pictures. And again, you can usually scare them up. Think birthday party in the kitchen. I mean, I've done this. Kids sitting in front of the refrigerator. So there's more out there than you necessarily kind of think of right away. Okay, now this is what we talked about before. Rehab project can have started or even completed, just not finished more than 2 years ago. Okay, so that's what I mentioned. If spending threshold is met and preservation standards are followed. And these are 2 examples, real. On the left is a house in Lake Forest that I worked on where he got my name from a neighbor, called me, and he said, I don't know, can I do it? And so it was already started. It's a wonderful, large, lovely home that was remodeled by David Adler. Well, you can't kind of do better than that. So he had started some restoration, but he had a plan to take out windows. Well, windows are a hot spot about what you do with historic windows. But they were really, really in terrible condition. And the city of Lake Forest had approved removing the windows. So I got a preliminary opinion to find out, is that okay? And they approved it. They said it was the State Historic Office reviewing architect said, yeah, that's okay. The windows are practically, the glass is falling out, it's broken. It's been empty a while. It had suffered some things, air conditioners in the window. Okay, so it is okay to start in the middle. It's a little treacherous at the end, if you maybe have done something, and we can answer questions at the end, but if you've done something that could endanger the freeze happening because the standards weren't followed. But that was the one. And then the other is here, where 615 Elm, we did a landmark nomination. You guys approved it. And they had already did an addition. They got a zoning bonus, and we'll talk about that, for the work. And they put an addition on the back. Done. you know, but it was, they followed all the guidelines, so they got the freeze. It was really a nice story. Okay, you don't need to read all this, but you can kind of scan it and see what qualifies. Window repairs, windows. The reason for windows, contractors will come to your house and they'll say, we'll replace all the windows. Well, I would take a deep breath and say, I don't think you want to replace all the windows, because you're talking about early growth timber, and they're sturdy, and they tend to generally be better windows. And I'm mentioning windows because windows are really important, and especially on properties where the windows are at the front and you see them from the street. So these are some of the things that qualify, but let's look at pictures so it'll be much clearer. All right, this is a great house in Evanston, south end of Evanston. And they did stuff on the inside too, but they tuck pointed the house, and they needed gutters and to repair copper gutters, and it's wonderful. So gutter and downspout repairs, tuck pointing next. I had to show you this house. This is in Chicago, but look at the before and after. I mean, isn't that just amazing? This is what had happened to it, you know, somebody thought, I want to stucco the house. I like that. Well, the people who bought it, they took off all the stucco, they rebuilt the porch. It looks like the Queen Anne it was meant to look like, and it's really gorgeous. Mechanicals, everything. I mean, I have counted things I don't even know what I was looking at. You know, that were these systems that did everything. And so that's, you know, unfortunately, when you buy a house, the first thing you have to do is make it safe. So you do all the electrical stuff. Kitchens, remodel kitchens and baths. Here's just a potpourri of some places I've worked on, but I'll give you a few specifics next. This is a wonderful little kitchen in a house of 4 square in Evanston. It is really, you know, it's just a comfortable, compatible to the house, and a handsome kitchen. Next, another wonderful kitchen here that on Oak Street, where you know, it had been remodeled over the years, but not in a very nice way that the owners want to do some work on it, and it is absolutely gorgeous. Next, bathrooms, total free in terms of what you can do in kitchens and baths, anything. So sometimes if a bathroom, I had a project in Lake Forest, structured glass is this colored glass that is jewel colors. You see it on the front of jewelry stores sometimes, but not used too often, but stunning. So there's this house that actually was, the family who lived there, their daughter was much publicized, a romance between F. Scott Fitzgerald and Ginevra King. That was the house she grew up in. The bathrooms were to die for, you know, with colors like sapphire blue and emerald green and pink in this structured glass and mosaics. They said, I don't think you want to touch the bathrooms. And of course, they fell in love with the bathrooms because they were so unusual and so beautiful. But I mentioned that typically you can do whatever you want in bathrooms. Floor repair. They like you to keep, if you have quarter sawn oak floor, which is really special, as opposed to plain sawn. Plain sawn is like this. Quarter sawn, it's more expensive. But the oldest houses, not older, but oldest houses were quarter sawn oak, and they're beautiful. And you can repair those. If there are nails popping through, then you know you have to talk about it with them, because sometimes you can't repair them, you can't sand them anymore. But mostly window repair, floor repair. Yep. Repairing historic features that are missing. That sconce is from the Kuppenheimer house, and that was designed by Frances Elkins, who was David Adler's sister. And anything by Adler or Frances Elkins is, you know, it's like a jewel, you know, like jewelry. It's so beautiful. And one of the arms was missing, and Chip had the arm replaced. Next. This was a house in Evanston where they put back historic windows. You can see on the upper left that somebody had wanted a large window and they wanted to put back windows as they were originally, and they had documentation to show what they looked like. Next.
And as you mentioned earlier, this wouldn't be a requirement to have to do it if it had been changed over time, but something that would qualify as an expenditure if somebody wanted to do that, right?
And look at this. I mean, here's where they decided they wanted walls between these two spaces, and they put back the French doors. Again, what Chris said, absolutely right. I'm mentioning this house because it's spectacular and it's on the market. So if you have friends that want to live in Kenilworth on Kenilworth Avenue, this is the house that Harry Weiss grew up in, Ben Weiss, the architects. And the people who live there just moved to Cape Cod, and it's on the market. And what she did is remarkable because it's an arts and crafts house, put back the William Morris wallpaper, and it's just amazing. That's all I can tell you. And that if you want to look at it, I'm sorry I don't have the address, but it is online and you can look at the realtor's photos. This is an interesting solution. So this was in the Kuppenheimer house. There's this fireplace. It's called Belection molding. It's kind of curve and counter curve, and it was in a glass surround. Well, at the time, it was impossible to replicate it. So the state approved a fee, something that was compatible, but not match it exactly. Finish attics and basements. Next. I've seen some remarkable basements. Here's next. I've got a handful of those, but you can just see that all that counts. And by the way, they do not care what you do in attics or basements either. So it just counts. So there's no review necessarily. Interior decorating, wallpapers, anything that's stuck. This is going to be funny, but the elements that need to be dealt with are anything that's stuck to the house. So you can't count furniture because if you turned the house on its side, the furniture would fall out, but the wallpaper wouldn't.
Isn't it like the idea of if you were to sell the house, the same conditions if someone were to buy it, if it's like nailed to the wall, it comes with the house, it's part of this.
Yep. So decorating, I just threw in a few slides of people that have painted or wallpapered or put in cabinetry and stuck to the house. So, yeah. Garages, additions, hardscape counts toward the 25%. And you can see additions are allowed. It is preferable that they be not visible from the street. Sometimes there are extenuating circumstances like ravines, or we can't put a garage anywhere else, or expand something, and they'll take that into consideration. I had to show you this because you think, oh, it's a Frank Lloyd Wright house, I can't touch it. Well, the people who live there, it's on Sheridan Road, near about the middle of Glencoe. You won't miss it. And the people, they had a kitchen that, today we're all in, we cook and our family and our guests and whatever, we all want to be part of the activity. Well, the kitchen was buried. So they wanted to change the kitchen and they had no place to, like a little family gathering area with a table and chairs and so on. And so you can see what they did at the back. And it made their life just all that much more wonderful, but it's a fright house and they did it. Here's some other additions. This is a house in Hinsdale. Next. They allowed an addition at the back, and you can see it's a fairly substantial addition. There was a family room, maybe kitchen too. I don't remember, it was a long time ago that I worked on it.
Oh, well, I added just a couple pictures in here about a couple projects I had been involved with. I gravitate towards challenging historic preservation projects, and this was a house designed by John Van Bergen, who was one of the last architects in Frank Lloyd Wright's office in Oak Park before when he left America for a while. And John Van Bergen designed a lot of houses in the area, lived in Highland Park for quite some time, and there's a lot of houses there. And this was on Isabella Street, which is the dividing street between Wilmette and Evanston. And it was purchased for the lot for somebody to build something new there. and the developer was willing to, you've probably seen these things in the, advertised before, like free house as long as you move it. And it sounds appealing, but it's, often people find there's a lot more involved with it. But this seemed like a neat project to be able to save this house. It was, fairly small. And so I got involved with it in 2014 now. It's been a while, but we were going to move it to Highland Park and planned on, there was a lot available on Green Bay Road at the time. And then kind of at the last minute, it fell through because there were so many municipalities that you'd have to go through, from Evanston, Wilmette, Kenilworth, Winnetka, Glencoe, Highland Park, all had to be involved, and they had their own set of restrictions and rules and things like that. So ultimately, in order to not end the project, we were able to work out where the Whole Foods is. Some of you who've lived here a long time might have seen it parked in the Whole Foods parking lot for a winter, because the Dominick's store that was there had closed and it was getting turned into a Whole Foods. So we asked if we could park in their parking lot for a while, because we had identified another lot on Crawford Avenue in Evanston, about 2.5 miles away. And it was kind of a straight shot there, but the lot wasn't ready and wasn't secured and stuff. So we parked it in the parking lot for what was supposed to be 6 weeks and ended up being 6 months, as these things go. And the store was ready to open, and they wanted the house out of their parking lot. So it was kind of a scramble, but a fun, challenging project. And the city was supportive. I think for any kind of project like this, you need kind of everyone. I found with these projects that I've been involved with some that haven't worked. And it's really just a matter of getting everyone kind of all on board with the idea that it's possible. So the house ended up moving once to the parking lot, and then again in March of 2015, it moved like 2.5 miles down Central Avenue in Evanston, going west to the new site. There's just a couple of photos of that. It was fun to see, and quite a undertaking to get everyone out there to clear the road and move streetlights and overhead wires and trim trees and all the things that I didn't think would be involved in this process. But it was kind of an interesting way to save the house. And then once it got to the new site, you can see here, there wasn't time to do foundations. So sometimes you do the foundations, move a house on top of it. Sometimes you move the house and then do the foundations under it, which was the case here. And it was kind of a hill front lot. So they just carved out the space for the house and then did the foundations under it and then put the hillside back. And then after that, it was basically just kind of a remodeling project. And the fact that it had sat in the parking lot for a long time, luckily the upper right-hand photo shows how it amazingly came back together with just like a 1/4-inch gap between the 3 sections of the house when it was cut apart. And then at that point, it was like a regular remodeling project where all the mechanicals had to be replaced, the roof had to be replaced, the foundations and things like that. And why we included it is because it was something that that we kind of did after the fact. We explored the process of a tax freeze, and we went through the process of listing on the National Register and locally landmarking it after, kind of almost after all this work was done, which it's a little bit harder to get through the National Register process when something's been moved because the context has been altered. But they did ultimately sign off on it for all the reasons that led to the project happening. And they did allow this to be listed. And then all of the expenses that were related to the project would be qualifying towards a tax freeze, with the exception of the relocation. The expenses of that, I think, would not be, at the time, wouldn't have been qualifying, but there were plenty of other things that added to that amount that made it work. So, and then had this been sold at the time, then, as Susan will talk about, it could be listed for sale with the tax freeze that could go to the first owner of it. And then just one other really quick project that I was involved with was the Keck and Keck designed Abel and Mildred Fagan house in Lake Forest that Susan was involved with. It was a great historic house. The Keck brothers were really early innovators in passive solar heating. The house had a flat roof that originally had like a 4-inch pool on the top of the entire roof, which is like, I think the roof is 6,000 square feet or 7,000 square feet because there's so many overhangs and things. And then that was meant to hold water so you'd get evaporative cooling. In 1940, right? Is that right? I think
I can't remember the date.
40. Yeah, in the 1940s, it was pretty early on, and that was changed over time. But the house had kind of fallen, 49 maybe.
Yeah, I think.
It had fallen into disrepair. Their owner had moved away, and the roof was leaking everywhere, and it had collapsed in some places. So it was really kind of in rough shape. But Lake Forest has a fairly strong preservation ordinance that has up to a 2-year demolition delay. So I think maybe that scared off some people from wanting to tear it down. So we took part in a full restoration of the house and had to replace all the mechanical systems. The radiant heat in the floor had failed, so that was replaced, and the roof was replaced, and a lot of interior finishes and things. And then Susan did the landmarking process and National Register listing as well. And then and they were really flexible with what had been like a service wing with like a servant's bedroom, a laundry room, a kitchen, a family room. All those spaces were allowed to be kind of opened up because they were secondary spaces to create what a lot of people want now, which is kind of like an open kitchen family room area. So it feels a lot more modern in that way, as opposed to have a lot of smaller rooms. And then the house was sold kind of right before the project was done. You can see we didn't do the new cork floors in there yet, which was what was original. And a couple of architects bought it. And then all the paperwork was kind of ready to be handed off to them for the tax freeze. And since the house was acquired basically for the land value at the beginning of the project, there would be substantial cost savings with the tax freeze.
That's a fabulous house. It was, in fact, Abel and what was his
Mildred.
name? He was Abel, she was Mildred. Fagan, yeah. Salvador Dali did their portraits. I mean, it was, and you can imagine the artwork. I mean, it was pretty special. So then we don't need to go over this again because we already have. But that's the final thing where you turn in the spreadsheet and you turn in the proof of expenditures. Next. So this is one I just finished in the last year. And I think it's important to really see that, I mean, there are some very substantial homes that have been landmarked and acquired the freeze, but this was a wonderful cottage on Ingleside in Evanston where they bumped out a dormer and put in a larger bath and built out the attic and made an office, and they met the spending threshold and they're thrilled. So it applies to a lot. Modern, this was a story where the owner bought the land on the lake, 2 lots, buildable lot, gonna just demolish and rebuild, and his wife fell in love with the house because why not? It's a beautiful house that by Edward Dart, next. And it won a Dree House Award, and it was on the cover of Preservation Magazine for the National Trust. So new counts. Okay, can you flip it? Yes. A developer can come in, buy the house, and sell it with the freeze. So, and this is, I'll give you a couple examples, lest you think that I'm making this up. This is a story where the people bought the house, were going to move in, decided to move into the city, and instead sold it. They were basically acting as developer, and somebody bought it, and they got the freeze along with the house. And this is recent. A couple properties in Evanston. One is this wonderful cottage off Dempster Street. I can't remember the cross street. And then also, this is a barn in the alley off of Church or Davis. It's Dempster, but off of Ridge. And it was a barn. I mean, you walk in it and I didn't want to go up the stairs. It's kind of in treacherous condition, but that was flipped and sold too. Here's some landmarks in town that have the freeze. And, you can always call me or whatever, or check the State Historic Preservation Office tax freeze. Just Google it. And they, believe it or not, it's actually a governmental body that has really good material. It's not opaque. You can, it's pretty clear Q&As, and it's very good. So that's something you can do. And then I had fun last week, except I was too late in the day because it was getting dark. But other than that, I just drove around town and took a lot of pictures because there's so much here that is eligible. And you want to just flip through them, you know,
Variety of types,
just a variety
big and
of
small.
types and houses, arts and crafts, cottage, Tudor. cottage. Anybody's house? Yeah,
Yeah, we own the red one and the one behind.
bingo. Well, there
Yeah,
you,
my parents.
there you go.
Yes, the two we have are landmark.
Wow. So, I just, as I said, I had to stop because it was getting dark, but other than that, you know, just modern Spanish, Tudor, you know, so Winnetka basically has a wealth of riches and nobody should be discouraged. So it was, anyway, it's a lot of fun and to learn about your house. It's great to landmark it and see it receive recognition and get a plaque. And at the same time, you get a tax benefit if you spend the threshold and landmark it, spend the threshold and follow the guidelines. So that's the story. Yes.
In your experience, people might say, let's say they bought a house in the 20s, and then they already spent like, let's say they spent 200,000 just to restore it and decorate it, and then I'll bring this idea to them and say, oh, is it really worth it? I mean, why bother? Is there, in your experience, is there a percentage of that you can cover? I mean, for having spent the money. In other words, is it worth it to go through the whole process?
Well, I was just asked, is it worth it to go through the whole process? And one of my clients of a house that I showed you said to me, I'm really grateful because this allowed us to do more to renovate the house. So the time it doesn't work is when somebody says, I really want to paint the varnish woodwork. And they really want to do it, you know, and so they can't if they have to follow the standards. And so they pull out. But I've never, because when I work on these things and I would advise anybody on their own, or I would, you know, if you have a question like that, can I do this? I will get a preliminary opinion up front so nobody doesn't get it. I mean, if once you start, if you do your due diligence along the way to make sure.
Percentage of the tax benefit. I mean, what is?
Well, with that, just, I mean, really overview wise on that Kekakek house in Lake Forest, it was sold, like I said, basically kind of for the land value at the time that we got involved with it, which was like $500,000. And then after all the work and everything like that, it was more than double that is what the final kind of outcome was, just because all the renovations and mechanicals and everything like that. So the assessor's value at the time of the project started was based on that much lower cost. And then if you fix that cost for that period of time that Susan mentioned, you can think what percentage of savings over the course of the years. So if somebody was only going to live there for 1 year, maybe it's not as beneficial. But if you're, planning on being there for in order to take full advantage of that tax frozen period, then it could be, tens of thousands of dollars, just depending on the scenario.
I have a way of trying to figure it out, and I'll tell you what it is. I'm not telling you it's perfect. My background is in art history and not in accounting, but I didn't forget. I just, while we're on this subject, here's what I do. If it went up, like I showed you with that example, I take the tax rate and the equalizer and I apply that to, okay, it went from 750 to $1 million. I'm making this up, but 750 to $1 million. So we know what it is for today. And I don't necessarily have access to the old records. You do, so you can look at it for your house. But I just multiply it out as they tell you to on your second tax bill, and then I can get pretty close to what you say. I just did one the other night that their tax was 32,000, and based on what their assessment went up, it went to 47,000. And I mean, that was kind of sticker shock time, but I mean, that's how I try to figure it out, to make it work. I've never heard anybody complain. I've never heard anybody say, I wish I hadn't done this. In fact, I've been taken out to lunch a few times. So, yes.
So here's what happens when the tax freeze is over, right? You've talked about sticker shock year over year without doing these. How insane is the sticker shock after the freeze is done? When it gets reassessed?
Well, first, it isn't immediate.
Right.
So you don't, year 8, you've had 8 years. Then it goes up in quarterly increments. So you don't go, you go, oh, a little bit. Then, and this honestly, I have a job now where they want to do something else. This is pretty amazing. So you can do it twice. You can't freeze it. You can't freeze it at the old number. I mean, what it goes up to, it goes up to, you've already had a lot of benefit. But if you want, this is in the city, on Cleveland or Fremont, I can't remember, but one of those streets, they want to do some redecorating. They want to redo their kitchen. I mean, there's a lot of stuff they want to do. Somebody had done the freeze before them, or if you did the freeze before, it didn't matter. It was done. But if you did it before, you can do it again, and you can do it right away, but you can't freeze it at that old number.
It has a new baseline.
It has a new baseline. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you're
good
gonna
question.
tell us you get your landmark status, and then it's time to move. Are there restrictions on what, can somebody tear it down?
I think you should really talk to the landmarking part. The freeze does not pass to it. I mean, you got the benefit because you did the work, but in terms of
And it depends on where you live too. I mean, Winnetka has one set of rules regarding what landmarking means. And other municipalities have different rules as well. In Winnetka, it's not, the rules maybe aren't as stringent as some other places, like Evanston or in Chicago or something like that necessarily. But yeah, I think landmarking here, from what we've seen, I think is something that people have done to either take advantage of these incentives or to just celebrate the history of their property. And it hasn't, I think because of locally what landmarking means and what the rules surrounding it are, we have not seen it to be a deterrent for somebody selling their property. It's not as, restrictive as some places might be. And the people that tend to, gravitate towards these properties, might be somebody that wants to see it saved as opposed to torn down. So, the village and the Historic Preservation Commission certainly can provide more specific info, but that's kind of generally, we haven't seen that being a deterrent.
But could it be torn
I think the question was, can a landmark be torn down? I think this is.
I think locally, yeah, it's not a completely definitive, form of preservation.
Well, I'm Jack Coladarchi. I'm the chairman of the Historic Preservation Commission. If a property is local, there's the national landmarks. They have much more restrictive rules out there. A local landmark can be torn down. And our job is to try to stop that from happening. Obviously, try to get as much property as we can preserved rather than torn down. But landmarking, provides you some benefit. And again, it's more a matter of pride and, so no, if you get landmarked, the property doesn't fall into that forever. Landmarking status locally does not affect the property value, like a national landmark might, or places, where there's easements or things like that continue on past ownership. So, but yeah, landmarking locally, people will come in for advisory opinions to our commission and say, we just had this at our last meeting. Somebody had a landmark house and they were doing a lot of rehabbing on it. So they've been in front of us, I think, 2 or 3 times to have us give advisory opinions on whether or not the corrections or the additions they're making, the modifications or rehabs they're making, will keep them in landmark status. So the one we have pending right now has to do with the windows. They want to replace some old windows, and so we had questions for them. Are the windows you're going to put in, the new ones, are they going to be, are the mullions? Is that the right word? I'm not an architect, I'm just a lawyer, but if the edges, will the edges, the new windows create too much of an interference on light coming through the window? And will it look wrong? And so they're asking us for an advisory. It's not we don't control, we just say, yes, you'll still have your minimum standards at the end of it. So that's a long-winded way of answering your question.
The only reason saying slow down here, I live alone now when to tear down.
It's different, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like,
Oh, I want to clarify that. The National Register is honorific, and people really, like Louise, really wanted her house listed on the National Register because it calls attention to its significance. The only time that you're prevented from tearing down a National Register listed house is if there's an easement on it. And if there's an easement, that's a whole different thing. It runs with the title and it's forever, and it does stop it. But just by listing, it does not. You can tear down a building listed on the National Register.
Lloyd House is that?
There's an easement there.
There's an easement?
Yeah, if there's an easement on it, that's a whole, I'd be happy to give you the Cliff Notes or refer you to Landmarks Illinois to discuss that, but that's kind of how it plays out. Yeah.
So you mentioned you can sell a house that you've had the freeze on.
Right.
Are you still, prior to selling it, expected to spend that 25% that you committed to spend when you took the freeze, 25% of the value before you sell it?
I'm not sure I understand.
So you said that when you take a freeze, you're expected to spend 25%
Yes.
of the value of the assessment when you took that freeze.
Yes.
Are you expected to spend that before you sell that house?
So the freeze you wouldn't get the freeze in place until the spending is done. So you do the spending and then the freeze comes into place.
Yep.
And then if you sell, on year 5 of the freeze, and the freeze just goes away. And then the assessor would probably reassess either at the time of the sale or at the next reassessment period. And then for the new owners, if it had been taken kind of mid-freeze, sold mid-freeze, then I think the new owner or the new taxes would not be related to the freeze, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's
true.
So if a developer comes in, like some of the ones you've spoken about, and wants to pass it on to the new owner, how does that happen? They don't take the fee so long as it's not initiated?
No. Yeah, I'll explain how it works when you flip it. If a developer comes in and he wants to rehab the house and sell it, which I wish more developers did. I mean, I wish they were more enlightened.
Only I don't sell them, I just hold them. Right, we have 15 buildings in Chicago that I purchased, restored, and restored.
Whoa. There's a woman here, if you can't hear online, who owns 15 properties in Chicago that she's bought and rehabbed and restored. And kudos to you. Yes. Yeah. Right. So the way it works is, okay, you own this property, you have filed a Part 1 that your building needs to, in Chicago, needs to either be a landmark or a contributing building in a historic district, and there are many historic districts in Chicago. I have kind of a lot of work in Chicago, which is kind of nice, that people want to do it. I wish that I live here. I wish more people in the suburbs did what you do. So what you do is you file with the state, you say, I'm going to do this, or I've done this, if you've already done some. And you show how it's a contributing building in a historic district. And you then write up what you've done on the Part 2. And there's a lot of good material online from the State Historic Preservation Office. Then you don't do the Part 3 that shows the financial piece of it until you have sold the property to the new owner because they are the first owner residents. And they're the one that get the freeze. And that's how the flipping works. Is that clear?
Yes, that's.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh,
There's an easement though.
okay. Here come the cliff notes to the easement, and this is so complicated. But when there's an easement, and this is the best preservation tool, and it only applies to National Register, not local. So if you get an appraisal, now what an easement is like a promise you're not going to change something. You know, I'm not going to tear down the front entrance to your house. I'm not going to change the roof line. I'm not going to impede the way what makes it significant. So you get an appraisal. You can't do all these changes. You created this document that says, I won't do this. And then you get an appraisal by a proper appraisor who will appraise the property as it is today and as it is what it is worth when you've already promised. You're not going to make these changes, which by the way also means you're not going to tear it down because you can't. So you're diminishing the value of the property between those two appraisals. Then that amount of money you can take as a tax deduction. And this is all worked through Landmarks, Illinois downtown. And that's the Cliff Notes. And more than that, it's not so complicated to the people that do it. It's just complicated to me.
But the easement attaches to title, which means that it goes
Correct.
with the property.
Correct.
And doesn't come off of the property.
The easement attached, I'm gonna say what Jack said because for the people who can't hear him. The easement attaches to the title. It's recorded. And so people cannot change it. Did I say it right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can one get an easement if the house has a mortgage?
Probably. It would change the value of the mortgage. You'd have to let the mortgage hold it.
I defer to Landmarks, Illinois as to how a mortgage impacts the donation of an easement. I'm sure that they have done this for 20 years, and I'm sure they can answer these questions. It's just that I can't. Yeah.
Does the home be in the name of the owners or in the name of a trust?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Done both. It could be, a lot of people put their property in a trust.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you for
Yeah,
saying.
thank you.
Yeah, I hope some of you will consider it because it's a really good program. I hope you can do this with the properties. I'm sure many of them are in historic districts. The person I'm talking to is from Chicago. So, you know, and by the way, the rules differ from suburb to suburb. What applies in Winnetka is not going to apply in Wilmette and not going to apply. You have to talk to the folks, and we're working on a preservation plan for Wilmette. Yeah, well, make your voice heard to the people because this is very important for them. I mean, they've had in Wilmette, they've had some programs at the street fair, I forget what it's called.
Yeah.
There was a table and they're trying to get the word out, but this is the time in Wilmette to really make your voice heard. And you say, I'm not happy with this and we want to see this change and that change. Do it now because I'm reading the draft as we speak.